In this video, I'm going to reveal a very unknown compression technique that professional mixing and mastering engineers use all the time to make songs sound loud and punchy. And guess what? It's not multiband compression. In fact, this compression technique that I'm about to show you in this video beats multiband compression out of the park 95% of the time, and I'm going to show you why. My name is Philipp from Pick Yourself. I produce, mix and master music full-time in my Berlin-based studio. I specialize in electronic music, and I've created this channel to help you succeed with your music, get to better results, simply by sharing some of the lessons that I've learned over the past 15 plus years of doing this. And so here is my free gift for you. It's called the Finisher Framework. It helps you get to at least one great sounding song per month by implementing a great system for finishing tracks. It's divided into 3 simple steps. It's super quick to consume, but very, very helpful. Go to pickyourself.com/framework. The link is also in the description. Now let's jump into today's tutorial. Let's be honest, in most dance-oriented genres of electronic music like techno, house, EDM, most mixes and masters are still at a very high competitive loudness. Now the problem is that we have this constant battle going on between wanting a loud master on the one end, but also we want to still feel the music. We want the bass groove to kind of move us, and we don't want everything to be just super flat. Now, how do you get there? For whatever reason, there is this ongoing myth that multiband compression is supposed to be the solution, like the holy grail of compression that solves all your loudness and dynamics problems. Now, to be honest with you, in my experience as a professional mixing and mastering engineer, and this is also the reflection that I get from most of my colleagues, is that we tend to use multiband compression in very specific use cases to solve very specific problems. It's not like something we put on a whatever mix and master to just make it sound loud, because there are severe side effects to this. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't use multiband compression at all, but you have to be aware of what this is doing, how it works under the hood, so you can make an estimated decision on whether or not it's the right tool to use in that specific situation. There is a better way in 95% of cases that I'm about to show you in a minute, but first of all, let's talk about what multiband compression does and what the side effects of it are. So a multiband compressor splits the signal that you send to it into different buckets of frequencies. So you, for example, have a 5-band multiband compressor that has the sub-frequencies, then the bass area, the mids, high mids, and then a top end, for example. This would be one of the ways to distribute this. Sometimes a multiband compressor only has 3 bands or 2 bands, but every multiband compressor cuts the frequencies into specific buckets that it compresses separately. Now I want you to think about the consequences of this. What does that do to the music? First of all, for a multiband compressor to split the frequencies into different buckets, it obviously has to use heavy filtering, and heavy filtering always comes with consequences. This affects the phase domain, and even if you're using a linear phase filter to split those frequencies, this can introduce an artifact called pre-ringing that I've mentioned already a couple of times in other videos. And so this does not necessarily have to be a problem, but it's something to have in the back of your head and check for if you listen to this. The second consequence of using a multiband compressor is that you are also ripping the groove apart. So if you're using this on a complex signal and you have different attack and release settings on all those different bands and different ratios on all of these bands, well, what this does is it kind of creates an artificial groove on top of the groove that you programmed originally in your music. Now, sometimes this can be a desired effect, but in most cases, I actually find this destroys the groove a little bit. Now, to give you an example, I have used the multiband compressor inside Ableton Live here on my master bus. So this is how it sounds without. And I've tried to just control the dynamics with this multiband compressor as much as possible. So we have theoretically a louder signal later on. I've obviously compensated with the output for the additional loudness. Overall, this is a way of using a multiband compressor to technically make the signal louder or for a louder master, but not necessarily better. Let me show you with and without. So here's what I am hearing. I feel that overall, yes, it sounds more controlled in a way, but also I think the clarity of the top end is getting lost here. I don't hear the snappiness of the transients as much. I also feel that the mid-range sounds kind of artificially pushed, and overall the groove gets a tiny bit wonky. Let me play this one more time for you and now listen with this information to it. So the conclusion here is what looks technically more controlled is not necessarily the better option for you. Now, what is the solution here? I'm going to reveal a compression technique that I find super effective. It's something that I use in almost every mix and master that I do for my clients. But before we get to that, if you got any value out of this so far, consider subscribing to this channel, liking this video. This gives me a clear indication that I'm on the right track, and it helps me produce more videos every single week. So here is by far my favorite compression technique. It is simple one-band compression, but with a detection circuit that takes out some of the low end and therefore lets the compressor react differently. Now, let me show you exactly what I mean. Let's try this out on the drum group first. I'm going to solo the drums. They sound like this. And first of all, if we use a standard glue compressor, for example, can do it like this. So fast release time, slow attack time, mid ratio. So in a way, it already sounds quite good and a little bit more glued together. This is the purpose of the glue compressor. But the one problem that this doesn't solve is that the compressor reacts very heavily to the kick drum. So the kick drum is a very emphasized part because it has so much energy in the low end, and therefore it pushes the compressor quite hard. Even though we don't want to compress the kick drum as hard, it's probably already compressed on its own. And this is why when you want a impactful and clean and punchy sounding but still loud mix and master, you want to actually leave the low end intact as much as possible, maybe very transparently clip and limit it at the very end of the process, but you don't want this thing to be the one thing that feeds into your compressor the most. Now, one compressor that has implemented this spectacularly, big shout out to TDR because they created the Kotelnikov compressor. The Gentleman Edition is just for honestly professional mastering engineers. No one else needs this because all the core functionality is also in the free plugin. And what this has here is the so-called low frequency relax circuit in the detection circuit of the compressor. Now, what does that mean? So let me show you this from the manual of the free version of the Kotelnikov compressor. Low frequency relax consists of a specialized high pass filter purely meant to control, for example, correct the compressor sensitivity to low frequency content. Or from a different perspective, it allows to make the compressor's threshold frequency dependent. The filter's corner frequency ranges from 25 Hz to 500 Hz and offers 4 different filter slope options, 0 dB per octave, 3 dB per octave, and so on. And so here's why this is important. The spectral distribution of typical music content and speech is not linear. Instead, it has the tendency to approximate a pink noise distribution. Given this fact, and without additional weighting, a wideband compressor will somewhat overreact to low frequency content and accordingly underreact to high frequency content. This central problem has the potential to introduce negative side effects such as pumping and distortion, as well as a severe reduction of the impact and neutrality of compression. This is an awesome explanation of what this circuit does. Now, this does not split the compressor itself into different bands. It just focuses on the detection circuit of the compressor and tells the compressor, hey, please don't react as dramatically as you normally would to the low frequency content. So in our session, we can dial this in here. Let me first of all show you what this sounds like if I have this completely flat, and let's push this a bit more aggressively. This is such a transparent compressor. Even this setting sounds good, which is quite impressive on its own. But still you can hear really clearly that it's reacting a bit more to the kick drum compared to the rest. I can push it even more so it becomes more audible. So you see this is moving with the kick drum. And so let's now try out some of this low frequency relax. So I've changed none of the other settings. I just left the low end completely intact. So right now the kick drum is almost non-existent in the detection circuit, just a tiny bit. And so it's more reacting to the high frequency content. Now this here is not a great setting right now. This was just for a demonstration, but let me now dial something in that makes sense, that will help you understand how I would use this in a real session. So my goal is to glue the drums together in a natural way. So what I will do is I will make this slope more relaxed here, but bring the corner frequency down a bit, so it's just taking out the very low end. Let's also be a bit more gentle with the compression. Some more transients poke through. Fast release time. Let's check this out now. Okay, so this is the type of compression that professional mixing and mastering engineers use all the time. And if you didn't really notice that much of a difference, yes, this is exactly how we work. We solve problems when they exist, but when there are no problems, we just give gentle touches here and there to make it sound slightly better. And the sum of all these little parts is what really takes a production to the next level. Let's now have a little bit more fun with this and see what we can do on the master channel, using also some other tools that have the same function. So this bad boy here that you're looking at is the Shadow Hills Mastering Class A compressor. It's a fantastic tool. I use it in many mixes and masters. And this has an internal high-pass sidechain filter for the detection circuit. And you can activate it here. So now it's activated. But first of all, we will just not activate this and dial in a normal setting. So first compression stage is an optical one. Then we have a discrete one. I won't go into the details of this terminology, but just have to know that this meter is showing you the first compression stage, and then it's feeding into the second one. So sounding quite good, but I still feel like overall we don't see that much of the top end being controlled right now, because the compressor is already taking off a little bit of gain due to the reaction to the kick drum. So we can obviously see this even more present if we activate the rest of the music. So this was just the drums feeding into the master channel. Now with everything, it sounds like this. And now you can already tell that this gets a bit problematic, because on the one hand, yes, it's kind of controlling the top end a bit more, but still it feels like it's already sucking out some of the energy. It's reacting very heavily to the low frequency content, not only the kick, but also the sub rumble that is in here and the bass. And so I think this is not the ideal setting. This is the perfect way of now introducing the sidechain detection and taking out some of the low end from the sidechain circuit. And just to make this clear, this has nothing to do with sidechain compression that you hear about. It's just sidechaining the detection circuit of this compressor. There's a huge difference. Okay, so here let's set this filter to, let's say, 160 Hertz and put this in, and you will see that there's much less gain being reduced now. So once again, I'm compressing very gently, but you can already tell that for whatever reason, like the drums are poking through, they're popping out, everything comes to life a little bit more. And this is why this is such a beautiful compression technique. It, yes, controls some of the transients and glues stuff together, but at the same time, it does not take away from the overall punchiness of the signal. It actually adds punch instead of taking away, like the multiband compression did earlier. Until next time, and don't forget to grab your free download at pickyourself.com/framework. Bye bye.